Hi, it's Alex Cosper for SacTV, and hey, thanks for joining us. My two special guests, one of the best morning teams ever in Sacramento, Shawn and Jeff Jensen.
Hello.
But you now go by your real name, right?
Yes.
So Jeff Machado.
That's it, yeah.
And you do voiceover work. Who do you do voiceover work for now?
A lot of audiobook stuff. So it's really for whoever is producing it at the time. Nothing you'd recognize yet, but I'm working on it.
So you read long stories.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you also do acting too.
There's a little bit of that, some
Oh, good.
stuff.
Okay.
So, yeah, staying
And
busy.
then Shawn, what do you do now?
Not much. No, I work for a company called Rockbot, and we do in-store radio stations. So we do the music and messaging side of things, and so I'm creating a bunch of annoying commercials that run inside of Best Buy or Walmart or Planet Fitness and places like that.
So it's similar to the company you worked before that you were running that I knew you were doing a while back.
Yeah.
I guess over a decade ago.
Yeah, in 2008, I, with a couple other people, started a company called Retail Radio. We sold that in 2017 to a company called Spectrio, and then I was fired from that company in 2020 and tried
Sounds
to
like
do...
a Steve Jobs story.
Yeah, I tried to do radio sales. I realized I had absolutely no marketable skills after doing radio, and luckily, one of my clients was Walmart, and they had called up and said, "Hey, we're going to switch to this company called Rockbot. Do you want to work over there?" And I said, "Can you make that happen?" And then he said, "We said we weren't going over there unless you were there." And I went, "Oh, all right." So that's how I wound up at Rockbot, and I've spent the past 4 years trying to steal all of my old clients away from my old company and bring them over there.
So Rockbot, that's like it plays music in the background at a retail store?
Yeah, so it's kind of evolved. When Rockbot started, their idea was to be a digital jukebox. So you could go to your phone and like a bar and you could change the music, but they've evolved from that, and now they do background music and digital signage, and they do all that stuff.
That's incredible, the world we live in now. How it's so un-radio. we used to be in radio back when that was radio's heyday, don't you think? Like in the 80s and 90s and even 2000s, maybe early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was really lucky in that I sort of caught the tail end of that wave. I have no idea what it was like in the the 70s and 80s, but I always think of that as the real.
I know you started in 89 in KWOD, but
Yep.
you were at KZZO before that, right?
I was working with Pat, Chris, and Charlie at KZZO.
Pat still in radio.
And doing a great
longest
job.
Ever.
Yeah, and I was just writing news for Chris, and I would just write the stories that he would go on the air with, and everybody hated anybody outside of that circle, and that's probably too strong of a word, but the door to the studio was closed at all times, and it was Pat, Chris, and Charlie, and they would always do backwards time, and it's Pat would say it's 7:50, and then Chris would say 10 minutes before the top of the hour, and that was their bit, and they would do that. And if it was something other than a round number, he would always screw it up. And so I wrote a time conversion chart that I used a typewriter to type up, because it was before the days of computers and everything, and I wrote a conversion chart for him, and I slid it under the door because I wasn't allowed in the studio, and Pat went and looked at it, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is funny." And after that, I was allowed in the studio, and it was just some stupid thing I did, but that was my big KZAP moment. But yeah.
Okay. Were you considered an intern, or were you paid at that time?
I don't think I was ever paid. I think it was an intern.
Okay, then you came to KWOD at a very volatile period in 89, this horrible thing called the Renegades, right? Was the morning show. It was just a free-for-all. We didn't have a program director for a while, for a few months, and so it was just anything goes, anarchy thing in the morning. and I guess you were part of that, but you did other stuff with the station, right?
Yeah, I worked for the promotions team. I did, because 97 Croy was a big competitor of ours, because we were just all over the place. I mean, the radio station had no direction until you said, look, we're going alternative. I mean, we played everything, and back then, I mean, the promotions team would drive by 97 Croy and throw out KWOD bumper stickers and put them all over their on-air window, and just dumb things. We would go to the FM 102 doing a broadcast with that big, it looked like a boom box, and they'd be out in front of Tower Records, and we'd go, and it had all these flashing lights around it, and we would go unscrew lights so that they would stop working and unplug the power from the back of it, and just really stupid stuff to try and just get attention until
Stunts,
you kind of
radio stunts.
Until you kind of put it in the right direction. We just
thank you for giving me credit, but I think it was actually Adam Smasher who changed the format one day when Jerry Cagle was away. It was in April 1991. And he just got sick of all the complaints of how bad the station sounded, because it was in the bottom of the ratings, and it was competing against FM 102 and Croy, and they were both beating KWOD. Kind of with the same kind of format. But he said that worked. He was playing modern rock. He just felt like playing it one day, and the phones lit up, and they got crazy. And I came back in June. KWOD had fired me in December 1989. Remember that Cagle? He just fired a bunch of people. And
so one quick story about that. Do you remember how we were all fired?
Well,
I know this story. I wasn't even there, and I know this.
So, and I think the magazine was Hitmakers, and we were all sitting around the conference table, and Jerry hadn't started yet, and we're sitting around, and it's Adam and you and all of the people that were on the air, and we're sitting around, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody was reading Hitmakers, and it said in there, and it was a Friday, and it said, KWOD in Sacramento cleans house. And we were all sitting there, we're like wondering, hey, it says Jerry Cagle comes in and KWOD cleans house, and we're like, oh God, that's now. And Jerry comes into the room and just fires everybody, and he turns to me and he said, Bud, you're not on the air yet. I don't know who you are. I got to keep somebody. You can stay.
You're lucky,
the only reason I got to stay.
But he also kept Pat Garrett, who then they ended up getting rid of because he actually quit and went to Croy, and that violated their whatever agreement with KWOD, and so then Croy he had to get fired from Croy, so he was nowhere. And that was weird. That took place in about a week span.
That was quick.
But you're right. I figured out that I had been fired when I showed up that day and went into the office to turn on the computer, because we had this old computer, and I was like the only one who knew how to run it, you know, besides Ed Stoles, and I turned it on, and it's like whatever, like it didn't work, like for the first time, like the password didn't work or whatever, and I knew, oh crap, something's changing today.
I put all my stuff in a box.
So anyway, 89 I left and came back in 91. I get a call one day from Jerry going, hey bud, you were right. This music does work. and it's funny because I did say stuff like, yeah, we should mix in more modern rock, but I never said let's go all out modern rock.
I always gave you credit for that.
Yeah, well, I actually did get credit 2 years later deserved credit 2 years later, because we were still a top 40 reporter to the trade magazines.
Okay.
Or whatever, Contemporary Hit Radio was the name of the format, but we were still what was considered top 40, so that we were in the same realm as FM 102 and Croy until 93, the year you guys started. So right when you guys started as the morning team, that was right after Jerry left, right? that's when we officially became an alternative station.
Yeah, and the way we started, to my memory, is I was doing mornings with Jerry.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I was Rainbow Johnson is what he called me, and that was my on-air name at first. And Jerry was doing it, and he had no desire to get up that early because Jerry was up late, out partying, doing whatever. And I remember we did it for about 2 months, and then he would start calling in later and later, and it would be like 5:30 in the morning that we started, and like 6 I would get a phone call, "Bud, I ain't coming in." And it got later and later that he would make those calls, and finally he's like, "I'm not doing this anymore." and were you, because you were doing what at the time that Jerry decided he wasn't doing it anymore?
I was updating the snow phone, among other various assorted tasks.
Yeah.
I was doing like weekends and
Okay.
oddball overnight shifts and stuff.
Yeah, and so, but Jerry finally left in January of '93
Okay.
to go run a magazine in Southern California.
Yep.
And that's kind of when Ed Stoll said to me, we had bad ratings, we were still at the bottom of the ratings, and he goes, pick a format. And I said, well, how about if we, instead of pretending to be alternative, if we actually became alternative? Because we were still playing Madonna and sometimes
Susie the Banshee.
Yeah. I mean, we were mixing in actual top 40
Yep.
stuff, like Prince, and which I actually thought crossed over all right. Like
Yeah.
it was all right. But we were still mixing in these oddball pop songs that gave it away to a lot of people that we weren't really alternative.
Yeah.
And we were trying to fit into this, well, at the time, Top 40 was considered a leading format, especially for record sales. And so Jerry liked that credibility with the record industry.
Right.
So he wanted to hang on to that as a reporter to those like R&R and Billboard and all those trade magazines.
Right.
He wanted us to be a top 40 station.
Yeah.
And after he left, where he didn't have decisions anymore, and Ed's asking me, because there's no one in between anymore, and he's asking me, what should we do? And I go, let's just become an actual alternative station, because that way we're not fooling anybody, including ourselves.
Right.
And we're actually doing what the audience wants, and who knows, that would give us more credibility in the industry if we were the number 1 alternative station
Sure.
in Sacramento, as opposed to the number 3 CHR
Right.
station. you
Right.
know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So he went along with that, and so by June we were a reporter, or that summer we started reporting as an alternative station, and that's exactly around the time you guys started doing the morning show, because
Right.
before that we had other people like Axel Marley and I forget, I don't want to mention Andy and all those guys.
Yeah.
We actually had this, he was kind of a joker, but he was more like Jerry's friend.
Yes.
And he actually worked for Howard Stern in New York. And he thought that meant that he had the same credibility as Howard Stern, who was a national figure, you
Yes.
know, but not this Andy guy. And we got so many complaints from people, this Andy guy trying to sound like Howard Stern or imitate him and say the things Howard said, and they just didn't go over. So we kept changing the morning show. It seemed like all the time.
Yes.
And eventually you came to me and you said that you and Jeff had been doing things over. You were doing the overnight show.
Yeah.
And that you were letting him come on, and you guys were doing bits together, and you actually played me a tape of it, and I go, yeah, that would work. And So all I had to do was convince Ed Stolz that they should be the morning show.
And I don't know how you did that.
Yeah, within days, you guys were the morning show.
I don't know how you
Because we
did
were
that.
desperate. I mean, we needed something.
Yeah.
You know? And I
Shawn and Jeff, it beats nothing.
I believe we had that T-shirt.
But right away, you guys were doing some kind of fundraiser thing that made it look like, oh, you guys are actually on the ball getting stuff done.
Yeah. Do you remember what the fundraiser was?
This was when we had pizza with the governor, yeah?
Yeah, it was right in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was?
It was the kids who got stiffed out of their vacation.
Yeah.
They were their senior high school class had planned this European getaway, and at the last second, their travel agency stiffed them and took the money and ran.
Wow.
So we did a fundraiser for the high school kids to get their money back.
And did they get their money back?
A
Yeah.
portion of
Yeah.
it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was all over. It was like, you know, when people use newspapers all the time, it was all over the headlines of the Sacramento Bee. And
Yeah.
I think it was Jeff's idea. It's like, hey, we should try and raise money for these kids, and that's how it all started.
Yeah.
That was,
You know, Sacramento Bee, I think, really helped Quad in
Oh, yeah.
lots of ways because Dan Vieira wrote about us all the
Yep.
time. He was the radio writer, TV radio writer for Sacramento Bee. And I met with him, and he was a really nice guy.
Yeah,
and
good
he
guy.
liked the station a lot,
Yeah.
to the point where I think one time the Bee said we were station of the year.
Yeah, he wrote about us multiple times. I saved some of the Sacramento Bee articles that he wrote about the station, that he wrote about us, and there's a bunch
Too
of
bad we can't research that anymore online because we're all paywalled out of the Sac Bee, which used to be owned by the McClatchy family when they were good, and then they went bankrupt because of bad decisions on expanding
Right.
at the time when broadband was taking over
Yeah.
the internet. And so then a hedge fund took over the Sacramento Bee, and now they don't even care about
yeah.
news. It's a rag. You can get it. You can still get the Sac Bee at like Safeway, I think, for
like
$3
$5 a pop or something.
$3 for this thin,
It's like
smaller
yeah.
thing. Oh man, they used to be part of the key to our
Oh yeah.
success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they're the key to no one's success.
We did. I personally, I just feel so privileged to have come into
Yeah.
media at that time, and I mean, especially at that station where, so much of the stuff you're talking about, the kids were running the shop. You're like, you flip formats because Dad was out of town, and you thought you could get away with it. I mean, like, who does that? It was in that sweet spot right before,
The Telecom Act.
The Telecom Act, and everybody started acquiring all the other stations, and you had these independent operators who could do their own thing, but you had such a clear identity for that station. It had such a personality to it. You can't even explain to people now, I think, who are in radio now, about the fact that when I first started interning at Quad, I could go to that station any time of the day or night.
Yeah.
Any time of the day or night, any day of the week. And there was always somebody live on the air, and there was always a bunch of people just hanging out with them.
Right.
The jock who was on next was there. The one who had just come off the air was there. Girlfriends were showing up. Like local bands would show up. I mean, it was
a center of this cultural scene.
Absolutely. It just had a personality to it that you just don't see anymore.
And it fit the format that you and I guess Adam had kind of figured out, because it was that rebellious music, and it was just a bunch of idiots running the show, and it drew the attention of people nationwide and locally, and because there weren't many of those alternative stations, I mean, we had, No Doubt in there, and Green Day in there, and every band came by, and we talked to them
Before they were
backstage.
known,
Yeah,
right?
nobody knew who they were, and it was amazing, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you guys deserve a lot of credit because our ratings began to take off. They were in the gutter for a while in the early 90s, and then Jerry left, and suddenly Ed Stolz had no one to turn to but me. I was the program director already, but he just decided not to replace Jerry with another station manager.
Right.
And part of it probably had to do with budget and all that, because the station was really doing poorly in the early 90s there. And then it was like convincing Ed to that we should just be this pure alternative thing, because that's what people expected. That's what, you know, I really think changed everything is exact time you guys started. We flipped format, and it came together as this, like you say, lots of identity. Before that, it didn't really have a lot of identity because it kept having all these different characters fired every month,
Right.
and it just had no consistency until about mid 1993. And then next thing you know, we're beating 93 Rock in the ratings.
Yeah.
And,
which was shocking. I mean, it was
and I didn't even think of them as competitors at the
No.
time, but we started to become competitors. And then pretty soon they were playing the same music we were playing, and then so was The Point, which became The Zone.
KWOD was just so cool because, like you said, I mean, it was at a time when alternative wasn't huge. There were a couple stations that were doing it, and you were spearheading it locally, and everything was analog. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't research things online. It was just
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was like an art project in a way, because most radio stations were heavily researched and
Yeah.
relied on just that, you know. So if a Depeche Mode song missed it by 1 percentage point, like 59% liked it, not 60%,
Right.
it got dropped at a typical other station. Whereas I would be like, no, that song's
Close
good
enough.
enough. And the artist is like, well, I already know lots of people love this artist, so
right.
let's just play it, you know.
Yeah.
So I would not follow the rules of the national consultants who kind of shaped a lot of radio stations back then. We were very free because we had an independent owner who pretty much allowed me to do what I wanted, and then I allowed you guys to do what you wanted. Except one day I came up to you guys and said, man, you guys got to stop doing Wiener Wednesday. and next thing I know, we had complaint letters this high of like, bring back Wiener Wednesday. So could you explain that? Like, why was that so popular?
And just to make it era appropriate, I'm sure all those complaints were on fax paper.
Yes. There were no emails sent in.
Right.
Yeah, no, Wiener Wednesday was enduring, wasn't it? I mean, that
Yeah.
thing just kept going and going and going. It was
And to your credit, I think by that, we were tired of doing Wiener
Oh, really?
Wednesday. But
I still remember getting those stories on fax. God, it was like we'd come in with this roll. It was like a paper towel roll, just overflowing with these stories. And it's just people writing stories about how somebody was a jerk to them. And so obviously the supply was endless. I mean,
Right.
who's ever going to run out of those kind of stories?
Right.
They were fun to tell. They were fun to listen to. It just worked.
I turned out to be the wiener, and that story went, I finally go, okay, you guys can do it again. But it was like, that was the only time I think I ever came up to you guys and said what to do. Other than that, I thought,
Yeah, I
thought you guys do whatever you want.
Maybe you should have done that a little more. Yeah, no, I actually became the wiener of one of the stories when I took my wife on our first date when I first met her, and had a simultaneous date with the woman who was the photographer for the station at the time. And so I set the date with that woman on Friday. The following Wednesday, I set the date for the same concert with my soon eventual wife. So, ooh la la about this new woman I met that I'd completely forgotten. I'd made a date with this other woman for the same event like 5 days before. And so, rather than do the stand-up thing and call the first girl and cancel and say, I'm sorry, but I've met this person and we have a thing and I really want to take her, I just tried to date them both at the same event. It was a sitcom event. I would like run from one to the other, like, how you doing? I'll be right back. How you doing? I'll be right back. And I just bounced back and forth between the two of them. Obviously, it didn't work very well. So, yeah, I became the subject of a Wiener Wednesday story about that. But
because the first girl wound up sending in her own story, and
yes.
Now, one of the most monumental things you guys ever did
Oh,
You weren't even on the air. Ron Givens and I filled in for you for a week because both of you wound up on a Star Trek episode.
Yes.
That is true.
And that was probably, I think, one of the best things you guys ever did was getting on that show.
And we can't even take credit for it. I mean, it was just because this station was so big and just so well known at the time. There was a guy who was going to school in UC Davis, and his mom was
The showrunner for
Yeah.
Star Trek Voyager.
Yeah.
Wow.
His dad is Dick Enberg, and his mom was running, this show on Paramount. And he said, "Hey, do you guys want to get on the show?" We said, "Yeah, can you make that happen?" "Hold on, let me call my mom." I said, "Mama, you're in." She says, "You
Yeah.
can come down to do a walk-on episode." Great. So
Yeah.
we went down there and spent a couple days and got to do a walk-on. It was amazing.
we were Sicarians, I believe.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Very
so,
attractive.
I mean, that's part of history because that show is very popular. And, I mean, the whole Star Trek thing is popular. And I can't think of any other morning shows that did that.
No, it was fun.
It's all who you know, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Just knew the right guy.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun sitting in for you for a week. But I had to listen to a lot of calls. When's Shawn and Jeff coming back?
Yeah, it was a fun time, and like you said, I mean, not a lot of research was available. It wasn't so much stuff online, and I just remember doing so many dumb things. I remember No Doubt being in studio, and I remember us interviewing No Doubt and the song Spiderwebs about, making phone calls, no one answers, and it was all about some terrible dating situation. And I remember saying to Gwen Stefani, I remember saying, "So is this song about anyone? Is it awkward that they hear this song?" And she's like, we're in the studio with all these people, and she goes, "Yeah, it was about him." And she points to one of the other band members, and we're like, and he goes, "Yeah, it's super awkward." We're going, "Oh, I wish I would have researched this." But yeah, I mean, it was just fun, and it was just crazy. It was.
So I thought the heyday was, the staff changed all the time, but
Yeah.
I mean, it had some consistency at a time when you guys did mornings, I did middays,
Yep.
Giles Hendrickson did afternoons,
Yeah.
and then Allie Storm did evenings.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was like kind of the best era we had.
Yeah.
And we were all musicians in a way. And
Hey, I was there. I was in a band with you, man.
but you guys wound up connected with a band called EWM, and we actually played the song they recorded called Indecent Exposure. It was about media out of control, following the OJ case, and it was kind of how media had taken over people's lives and how it actually was unreliable even back then. And that song I thought was awesome. It was something we actually played, a local song we played around the clock.
Now, wasn't that part of the listener contest
Yeah.
thing that you did, where people wrote the songs one line
Yeah,
at
it
a
was
time?
called the Overflow CD.
Yeah, yeah.
So we did a compilation. We actually did 3 compilation CDs, and the listeners wrote the lyrics. Just faxing in or phoning in lyrics, and then I gave them to local bands. By then we were starting to know a lot of local bands.
Yeah.
Right.
And they turned it into music, and so then we put them out on a CD, and that just turned out to be one of the best songs that you guys,
See, and,
the group you guys were aligned with, the EWM, their song Indecent Exposure. I just thought that was good enough to actually be a hit nationally.
Yeah, it was good. It was a lot of fun.
Right, and that's what I'm talking about that station having a personality. Like, who does that? Who turns over the airwaves to
Yeah.
listeners?
Social
writing
media
lyrics?
before social
Yeah.
media.
Right?
Yeah.
Local bands playing the music.
Yeah.
Like, what better way to build a relationship with your community?
Yeah.
I think that the biggest mistake, or one of the biggest mistakes that radio has made in this sort of post-consolidation era, is they've played away the biggest advantage they had, which was being local, being
Yeah.
exclusive to their local area,
And authentic. Yeah.
right, having that relationship with the listeners. I can't imagine how much that was worth in terms of, listenership or
Well,
ratings.
for
or
Quad, $25 million.
There you go. There you go.
Now you couldn't sell a station for that much, I don't think.
And they just don't care anymore. I mean,
No.
and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just they don't have the budget that they used to. And I mean,
Yeah.
radio stations, they have a conglomerate of 4 or 5 stations, and the DJs at those stations, they're not local. They're doing it for every other city, and they're on multiple stations in that same group, and it's not
Generic
that local.
as possible.
It's super generic. Yeah.
It's we all have fun stories about our owner at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I will say this for him. He cared about radio, and he cared
Oh,
about
yeah.
that station, and
And being independent.
yes. I can always, you see these situations where, okay, when you have a business, you can care, I think, about one or two things. You can care about the product, or you can care about making money. Like, which one is your main priority for you? And we got into that station in radio at the time when our owner cared about the product.
Mm-hmm.
That was his main why. Making money was a side effect
Secondary.
of that,
Mhm.
right? The second that shifts, and you start to become beholden to shareholders, and everything's all about making money, and making money becomes the priority, it all goes down the toilet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we were incredibly lucky to be there at the time when the product was the point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He so much so didn't really care about the money. I mean, all of his contracts with the DJs,
Yeah.
they were so foggy and,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to pay you this much a year. And then you find out that, only half of it is what I'm going to pay you. The other half is endorsements, and hopefully this club can pay you and all this stuff. But he cared about the product. I mean, he really just wanted to be in radio.
Then he did.
Yes,
But what
then.
eventually happened to him, and I was telling you this story before we got together, then I think I forgot to tell you the
The big
ending.
reveal.
But, he eventually lost Quad to a company called Entercom, which
Mhm.
later became Odyssey, which later filed bankruptcy. In fact, the top 3 radio chains all filed bankruptcy. That was Clear Channel, which became iHeart, and Entercom, which became Odyssey, and then Cumulus recently filed bankruptcy. So the radio industry's kind of gone downhill since 1996, the Telecom Act of 1996. But Ed Stolz, he acquired some stations in the 2000s, first I guess in Palm Springs, and I actually went down there to program one of those stations, and it was fun for a few minutes doing sales, but not really. I didn't
That is
like
not the
doing
F
radio
word I was
sales, just like
expecting.
you. I mean,
Yeah.
he kind of, made me think that I was getting this big paycheck finally for programming and being a midday guy, but actually he gave me a bunch of clients and I had to go get the sales. But anyway, after that, I quit after 5 months. And years later, he bought a station where I worked in San Francisco called Energy 92.7, and that was an independently owned station. They played kind of like dance music, electronic dance music, and I don't think they officially were a format other than that every song seemed either disco or the current dance type
Sure.
music. And anyway, he bought that station. They had been worth $30 million when their investors bought them, like in 2005 or something. And at the end of that decade, Ed bought it for like $500,000, $2 million, or no, $6 million. So it fell from $33 million to $6 million. He bought it, and the value kept sinking even after that, even after Ed bought it. And then in just in the past 5 or 10 years, Ed lost all his stations. He bought some stations in Vegas, as well. So he had stations in Vegas, Palm Springs, and the one in San Francisco. He lost all of them due to mismanagement, according to the FCC, because he did not, I should say, he failed to pay the music royalty bill to the, music industry, like ASCAP and BMI.
Oh yeah.
And every radio station has to pay them like something like 10 grand a year to use the music they're playing that is giving them the ratings.
Right.
Well, Ed just didn't want to pay them, and so he ended up losing all his stations.
Wow.
That's the way the cookie crumbles when it comes to the Ed Stoll story. But
And I still think there's a place for radio if it was done
but we
right.
were still good.
Yeah,
we all had fun.
Yeah, I mean,
if you took Ed out of the equation,
exactly.
I don't know. It would have been funner, except that he was the one who made it happen. As far as he was the only owner like that let us do what we wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
It was a blast.
And I think you're right. It could happen again. I mean, you hear what's happening with music today, and all this AI generated stuff, and everything's just becoming one vanilla schmear of the same thing. I can see a real hunger for something unique and different coming back.
We want real jocks.
Yeah, right. It's sort of like a new punk revival or whatever.
That could happen where radio knocks itself down to the level where it has to start all over again.
Right.
Yeah.
By then it might be all internet. Who knows? But internet radio it doesn't have the same kind of power as broadcast radio because, sponsors, they don't take internet radio seriously, and it's more like a hobby. I'll admit, what I'm doing here is more of a hobby. Whereas broadcast radio, there's still millions of dollars tied to it. But more on the national level. Like if you wanted to start your own radio station, automatically McDonald's, Pepsi, and Coca-Cola would want to be on advertising on that.
Right.
And you'd get a bunch of advertisers like that, So it's funny because Ed had that when he bought the San Francisco station.
Right.
But they all didn't. They all said no. We don't want to advertise on your station. So he lost a lot of actual gimme advertising. They would have just gone with him had he not, did something to cause them to go away.
So many somethings.
But anyway, getting back to this whole Shawn and Jeff reunion. I mean, it's really great to see you guys again. And
yeah, agreed.
I'm just curious, what's in the future for each of you?
I would like to keep going with the voice acting stuff, and I've kind of found a neat little lane with this audiobook narration thing. So I'm going to try and ride that train and see how far it
What
goes.
if AI takes over? I've already heard a bunch of stupid AI stuff on YouTube that gets names wrong. They mispronounce names all the time.
So here's my soapbox speech about AI. When it first came out, everybody was petrified. Like, oh my God, we're going to be unemployed in 6 months. I think the people who came up with AI, specifically AI voices, they took the term voice acting and they figured that the most important part of that term was voice, and it's not. It's acting. I don't say this to toot my own horn because I'm a great actor or anything, but it's not like that. It's that there's this quality to the human voice that it's perfectly imperfect, I guess, is the best way I can put it, that having it reproduced synthetically just doesn't reproduce well. You can just tell there's something about having a human do it, that a little pause here, a little chuckle there, a little stumble over a word there, a breath there, just these little humanisms that it lets you know immediately that you're listening to another human being tells you this story, as opposed to having a robot do it, which is kind of off-putting, or even worse, having a robot that is trying to make you think it's a human, which is just a betrayal.
Well, a lot of times they just give it away that they're not human.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, as this is happening more and more, and people keep testing the waters with these AI voices, I'm becoming more and more relaxed about it, because I'm sure there's going to be a market for it. For 80% of people, good enough is going to be good enough, and that's fine. But there's always going to be that subset of people that need to hear it from a human, and I don't see AI being able to replace that.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Shawn, what do you see down your path?
So I'm currently working for a company called Rockbot that does music and messaging for clients. We have a lot of really big clients for in-store radio, and it's funny because I won't name names, but there are a lot of big companies that are really pushing the AI envelope. They're like, hey, we want to write scripts with AI. We want to do this with AI. We want to do that with AI. We need you guys to have an AI voice tool. And I'm daily fighting that same battle that you were just talking about, because I tell them, it's like, look, if you're trying to do something for on hold and it's just a generic message that's just saying, hey, we're not here right now, leave a message. I'm like, you can probably do that all day long with AI. And who cares? Because they're going to hang up on it anyway, and they're not going to listen to it. I said, but if you're trying to get a message across, you can immediately tell with so many things on YouTube that are voiced by AI that it's done by AI, because like you said, there's a pause and it changes. And if you understand what it is that you're reading, there are places that you would slow down, and there are places that your inflections would go up, and there are all these things that make it sell your product. And there's big clients that need an education that AI isn't the end all beat all. That's not the thing that's going to make everything cheaper and make everything great. There's an actor needed, and that voice actor is going to have to be able to sell your product better than AI can. And so oddly enough, I'm kind of battling that same thing. I have the tools available and I can create a commercial using an AI voice, but I would much rather not, because it's going to be a better product. And so I'm kind of in a weird way doing the same thing that he is.
I'm with both of you guys and your views on AI. I had done writing for 2007 through about 2023. I've written for lots of different websites, so I learned a lot of different industries.
Mm-hmm.
Financial, real estate, health, just a long list of industries. Plus I started trading in the stock market. At one point I traded all my money away in the crash of 2008.
Right.
But I came back and I learned it, and so I was a blogger for a while, or writing all these reports for all these websites until the AI craze ended that. So I can relate to anyone who thinks that AI is a little too overbearing or a little too much hype for, here we are in 2026, and I don't think AI has taken over yet, but they're just pounding us with all this talk about AI.
Yeah, and I think there are going to be places that AI is going to be phenomenal. I mean, with research and being able to do things quicker than human testing and all of these kind of things, I think there's going to be a place for AI, but I don't quite yet see it being Terminator yet, where they create their own version of us and then they don't need us anymore. But
Right.
Wait, was that really the plan?
Skynet.
But definitely when it comes to radio, even
Yeah.
iHeart is saying
Oh,
that they're all human now. That's one of their slogans now. So they understand, I think. At first they tried to all the radio companies, I think, tried to make it seem like, let's jump on this AI craze.
Sure.
But then they realized the public doesn't really like everything going on with AI, especially if it has to do with radio.
Right. I can't fault them for trying, because I'm sure the
free.
savings are huge.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to your why. Is your why to make a good product, or is your why to save money?
Yeah.
And I think as long as it's to save money, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, so we were there once again in the heyday when radio was really cool before the Telecom Act, which really pretty much led to this consolidation of lots of big companies taking over small companies. That eventually happened to KWOD, of course. But KWOD is its most successful years were not its later corporate years when the big company took over. It was actually when it had a sole proprietor, and he let us have fun, and we had fun. So I just want to make that a very important point that when you guys were doing the morning show at KWOD, this was before the Zone. By the time you were on the Zone, the internet had kind of taken over, right?
It was getting there.
Yeah, and you had asked why. I mean, because talking about KWOD, it seems like it was this glorious thing, and why would we leave? And it was just kind of that writing on the wall thing. I mean,
it was fun, but it didn't pay that much.
Well, yes, and it was just. There were new program directors, and Ed had other focuses, and it was like, it was that whole, do you want to be fired or do you want to? Radio's a weird thing, and it's probably like this in a bunch of other businesses, but it's really easy to get a job, or it was at the time, to get a job in radio if you had a job in radio. If you were fired from radio, it was a much harder thing. And so Jeff and I had it's like, where are you currently working? Nowhere. Well. And Jeff and I just had a lot of conversation. It was like, hey, I think writing's kind of on the wall here. We should really start kind of putting some feelers out there and just see where we could go so that we could keep working in radio and not have to get real 9-to-5 jobs. And so that's that's kind of how we wound up at the Zone, because they were looking for a morning show, and I think we had reached the pay peak that we were ever going to get with Ed.
It's true. We kind of hit the ceiling.
Yeah, and so I think that was, unless you remember differently, I think that was
more. That's exactly.
So long story short, the Zone was a part of a corporation that paid good money to their morning teams. And that actually is an understandable move to go to that. From Ed Stoll's, he ran a really slim operation, and he beat the guy to follow if you're like, how do you save money? He was really good at saving money but then he'd waste it all in court, and that's how he ended up losing all his radio stations.
And the Zone, it was such a honeymoon too, because literally within 2 months of us getting there, we went on a station cruise, and then we went to the opening of Disney's California Adventure, and it was like, whoa.
Although I will say, the one thing that still pisses me off to this day about the Zone is there was a guy who was like, hey, come on over, this is going to be great, we're going to do all these things, and we got these ideas for billboards and TV, and we're going to do this. And within 2 months of us being there, he's like, all right, you guys, I'm leaving. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute. And then we had to start over with trying to prove ourselves to people as that turnover kept happening with different program directors and different station managers, and it all changed very quickly.
So anyway, radio is no longer what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
What it was the funnest job on earth.
It was.
And now I wouldn't call it that anymore. Anyone who's still in radio, that's kind of cool. It means they know how to use Craigslist, probably, because that's who they started hiring, people off Craigslist. Lowest bidders.
Radio was a blast, and there is nothing I regret about the 19 years I put into radio. It was a lot of fun.
There you have it.
Learn how to edit with a razor blade.
Oh yeah.
In the audio, I'm losing track of what's the opposite of digital.
Analog.
Back in the analog era,
and the
KWOD had its most success.
And the story he's talking about, and for those that don't know, is every phone call that came in at the time when we first started at KWOD was recorded on a reel-to-reel machine, and
with lots of splices
yes,
on it.
and to get a call edited, you had to take a razor blade and you had to cut it, and you had to cut the part out you didn't want. Then you use this little piece of tape and you would put it back together, and then you could play that phone call back on the air. And for some reason, Ed had installed the reel-to-reel machine so that the part you had to splice was on the bottom side, and it was on this cabinet. So to edit, you had to lay on your back and you had to edit and do these things. And when I was doing mornings and Jeff was there with Pat Still, who's still in radio, we had a phone call and the person said ass. And so Pat gave his highest compliment he ever gave to me when he was doing mornings at the radio station is I was on my back editing, and he says, "You're the only guy I know in this situation who could turn ass into as." I was like, I'll take that. So, yeah, but those are fun days.
Well, and plus we had to work with equipment that wasn't exactly state of the art. The machines were always breaking down. At one point, we only had one CD player working on the air.
Oh, yeah.
The rest didn't work. And I said to Ed, who was our engineer and our, the tech guy who would fix everything, I said, we only have one CD player working on the air. And he says, Alex, I can only send one player back at a time to the shop or whatever, the manufacturer. And so I actually brought my CD players from home, even though that it was wrong in the sense that it wasn't calibrated for broadcast quality.
Sure.
It was
Close enough.
I didn't know the difference. I didn't know there was a difference between broadcast and consumer equipment.
But like you said, Ed did everything. I remember we had a problem broadcasting our signal out, and I was with Ed because it was just one of those things, and this is before we were doing mornings. He's like, I need somebody to help me up at the transmitter. And I got into the station promotion van with him, and we drove up to El Dorado Hills where there was the tower up there, and he's like, I can't get in there, crawl in there. And so I crawl in, and he's like, all right, I need you to take the bolts off of this. And I'm underneath there, and I'm like unscrewing this thing, and I'm like trying to get leverage because they're on there really tight, and it's this narrow crawl space. And I went to lean back, and he goes, nope, don't lean against that. There's 50,000 watts going through that. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Because he did it all. I mean, he knew how to do it all.
Well,
Just didn't share information that I might have needed. But
well, we were off the air
a lot.
There were all kinds of times we popped off the air or something weird
Yes.
happened. Like he was always playing with the sound, and so one day we'd sound like the Grand Canyon, the next we'd sound like we were in a small room.
Yeah.
So, it was, but no other place could we have had that much fun, I think.
No, I agree.
All right, Shawn and Jeff, thanks for joining me for this
Absolutely.
fun reunion.
Yes, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
Kerrigan was attacked today at the U.S. warships are lying off the coast of Haiti today as exiled President John Machado while vacationing in Martha's Vineyard stopped his daily jogging for a visit. Michael Jackson was accused today of a solicitation of